Welcome to this week's Illustrative Insight. During this week's show, we're going to cover three topics. The first one is going to be the economic war that has started against Armenia. Second of all, we're going to move on to some important and positive business news. And then we're going to close with an update on our hostages being held in Baku. For months now, Georgian authorities at the border have been creating massive problems for Armenian exporters. This is focused on goods that are exported to Russia, things like cognac and other things that frankly aren't even going to be staying in Georgia. They're stopped for inspection and are delaying all of our exports going through Georgia to Russia. This war this week was actually joined by none other than Gazprom, which is the largest gas company in the world and the biggest company in Russia, actually, who we buy most of our gas from, and it actually controls the gas system in Armenia. They are constantly having breakdowns and repairs in delivering gas, so they stop it without much warning for weeks on end. This has yet to have an impact because of reserves that we have in Armenia, and these are intermittent. They come, they go. It's a constant threat of what they're capable of, not exactly carrying it out to the full right now. What are we to make of this? This economic warfare is almost likely to continue all the way through the next elections, because obviously the Russians want this current government defeated. It is almost certain that the Georgian authorities were acting on behest of Russian interests. The current Georgian authorities are quite corrupt and compromised, so it's not very hard to get them to do things like this for other people's purposes. This is a perfect example of Georgia's direction moving away from the West is actually quite problematic for Armenia. What this means is that we need to vigorously find markets outside of Russia, and there's efforts going through that, but they're frankly not fast enough, so we're not held hostage by the Russian economic system or by the Russian authorities. Now, is any of this likely to change Armenia's political direction towards the West and away from Russia? Not likely. In fact, it's likely to backfire. Almost everything that the Russians have tried post-22 on this front has actually backfired. In fact, if you were to write a research paper studying Russian foreign policy towards Armenia, the headline of that would be "How to Make No Friends and Influence No One." Now we're going to move on to talk about developments in our business and IT sector. It was reported that in the first 6 months of this year, the IT industry in Armenia actually grew by more than 30%. In June and July alone, it is estimated that that industry added 878 registered jobs. Now that actually sounds small, but frankly, in a place like Armenia, and given what these jobs pay, it gives you a trend of what it does over the years. And once you accumulate all those people with salaries that are much higher than what people get in Armenia. Recently, we got another piece of news on this, which is AMD is actually moving into Armenia by buying a local startup. For people who don't know what AMD is, in the world, there are actually three primary chip design companies: AMD, NVIDIA, and Synopsys. The latter two have already been here for years and have significant operations. By having AMD move to Armenia, it means we have the trifecta, which is actually quite impressive for a small country like this, that you have the primary businesses from the primary industry in the world, which is IT and specifically chip design. All of them will be operating in Armenia with Armenian subsidiaries. All of this, frankly, is likely to accelerate with the side agreements that were signed between Armenia and the Trump administration. These were the side in regards to side agreements that came out of the meeting in Washington last month. And what they really are going to lead to is far greater integration between the Armenian and U.S. IT sectors, which is a huge plus. If you actually look forward over the next 25 years, the future will be dominated by people who control the digital pipelines and data centers and not gas lines and roads. Moving on to give you an update on our hostages. Now we're on the 2-year anniversary of most of our hostages having been captured in Stepanakert in September 23, being in captivity in the dungeons of Baku. And one of these, actually, Viken Elekcan, has been imprisoned for 5 years, and he's the one who's on hunger strike right now. This week, the Prime Minister made statements that the hostages issue is something that they work on every day, and it's constantly brought up with foreign leaders. And I have confirmation that this actually is the case, that these issues are brought up, but it's also the case that it's simply not a priority for this government in the bigger scheme of things. One of the best examples of that is the fact that it's actually been taken off the negotiation agenda with the enemy state. Even more absurd, this week, none other than the head of the Armenian NSS, Anjanik Simonyan, actually was in Baku at an international conference. This is about 10 days after we have reports that some of our POWs have actually tried to commit suicide. I could care less if our officials go to irrelevant functions in Baku, but it is absurd for them to go there without demanding or coming back with some of our hostages. Because if you're not coming back with any of our hostages, then you have no business going there. So what needs to be done moving forward? First and foremost, we need to stop covering these Stalinist show trials as real trials, this motion, that motion. That's an irrelevant show. There's only one judge and one executioner in that country, and that's the man who leads the country. So to give these trials any form of legitimacy in covering them like a normal trial is absurd. And moving forward, since the Armenian state will not take real necessary actions to bring back our hostages, it's actually time for the Armenian nation to take over this process. Some say this is a hopeless situation. I've heard it countless times. There's nothing you can do. And that's complete and utter nonsense. And the best proof of that is the fact that we haven't even tried to run a public campaign to free our hostages. More importantly, to make sure that the enemy state and its officials are being confronted wherever they go, demonstrators, actions. Obviously, we're talking about civil disobedience and peaceful actions, but this needs to become a public issue, and if the state's not willing to do it, then this is something that civil society should be engaged in. A perfect example of this is a famous think tanker in Washington, Michael Rubin, who said that essentially we need to make Ruben Vartanian a household name all over the world, since he's the most famous person being held as a hostage in Baku. In short, what we need is action. It's time to stop playing nice, take action to free these people, and most importantly, not to continue this fight on the enemy's terms. This needs to be fought on our terms. Thank you for joining me this week's episode of Insights.
Got the black hat on, got a mojo too. I got the John the Conqueror. Oh, gonna mess with you. Gonna take you, girl, lead you by the hand. Then the world gonna know. Coochie coochie man, you know I'm here.